Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for WireMock Live. My name is Ethan. I work on product here at WireMock, and in a few minutes, I'll be handing it over to Dan, who runs our customer success program. This is WireMock Live, which is something we do about once a month or so, and we'll run you through anything new or exciting happening in WireMock Cloud, or we'll go over some existing capabilities that maybe you haven't explored in too much detail yet. A couple things to call out. If you registered for this, we will get you a recording by email after, and you're welcome to share it with your team. You can register for next month's. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Pretty soon, we'll let you know how to do that. If you put any questions in the Q&A section of Zoom, we will cover them at the end. We'll do a full Q&A at that point. They don't have to be on today's topic. Any questions related to WireMock or WireMock Cloud, you're welcome to ask in the Q&A. And if it needs personal follow-up, we'll definitely reach out to schedule that with you as well. And for today, I'm pretty excited because we've got some pretty cool new stuff. In fact, for the next couple months, I think you're going to see us covering some pretty exciting new stuff. We've got some very busy seasons ahead in terms of new capabilities for WireMock Cloud. What you're going to see today is the first release and the first set of things you can do with our new local first experience. So a CLI you can install on your computer. It's going to do a lot of things eventually, like local playback and full hybrid mode, but it starts off with what it does in version 1, and we'll go through that today, which is improved recording for APIs. And then we'll go through an easier way to configure your WireMock Cloud mocks for statefulness. Statefulness is really kind of one of the killer apps of what we do, but up until now, it hasn't been the easiest to configure. So we're going to walk you through a much easier way we've just launched to configure and what that means, right? Really what statefulness is all about. And in the end, we're going to do something we don't do too often in WireMock Cloud Live, which is show you a sneak peek of something that's not out yet. Normally, these sessions and for the future, they're all about stuff you can sit down and do today. But we do have something just around the corner that we'll be talking about more soon related to AI that we wanted to bring out here so we can get your feedback and see if you're interested in learning more. And with that said, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dan.
Awesome. Thank you, Ethan. Let me go ahead and get my desktop shared here for my normal Windows gymnastics before we get going. Great. So yeah, as Ethan said, we've got some interesting stuff to show you today, and really excited about what's coming, in the very near future. So let's start off with talking about the WireMock CLI. I'm not sharing very much interesting on my screen right now. Pretty much a blank mock API. But what I'm going to show you is a productized version of what some of you might have seen in the past or used in the past to help you record internal APIs. These are those APIs that you want to virtualize inside of the WireMock Cloud platform that sit behind firewalls. And in the past, using the typical recording feature inside of the fully hosted SaaS version of WireMock Cloud presented an issue, because where the servers run in the fully hosted WireMock Cloud typically don't have access behind the firewalls where your internal APIs are running. So our users of WireMock Cloud would have to either use an API gateway to allow access from the recorder, or perhaps poke a hole in the firewall to allow that recorder to work, or use a field solution that we had, which was a Dockerized container to facilitate that recording. As Ethan mentioned, our first release of what we're calling the WireMock CLI contains new capabilities, allowing you to record those internal APIs very quickly and easily. Of course, there's more features planned for the WireMock CLI that I think you all will get excited about. I'm not sure we'll have time to get into any of those details, but stay tuned for more exciting developments to the WireMock CLI. So let's get started here. So first, I will just call out real quickly the documentation. You'll already find this documented underneath the CLI section of the WireMock documentation, and it starts with the installation procedure here. You'll notice in the installation procedure, it's a simple npm install global availability of the WireMock CLI. So this will require you to have Node installed on your workstation or the server that you're going to run the CLI from. That is the one requirement, is having Node so that you can do this npm install. Once you have it installed, like I do on my machine, it will start to unlock capabilities. So having it installed, I can now say WireMock and ask for the help on this particular, or for the CLI application here. We can see what our options are and the various commands it's currently supporting. So the first thing we need to do is actually log in the CLI to our particular account. So I'll do that by issuing a WireMock login command. Upon doing that, we should be presented with this particular screen. I'm already logged into WireMock Cloud in my browser, so it hasn't asked me to log into my personal account inside my organization. I'm already logged in there. I have a valid session, but it is asking me to confirm this code with what is happening in the back here. So we can see that that code here, SGTT, is matching up appropriately, much like pairing Bluetooth that we're used to seeing there. I can go ahead and confirm that in the my browser tab here. Once I've done that, very quickly, we'll see that I'm now logged into the CLI. I can now issue that who am I command to verify that, WireMock who am I, make sure my session is valid, make sure it thinks who I am, Dan at wiremock.io. Yep, that's me. From here, now I can stand a recorder up to record an internal service. It doesn't necessarily have to be an internal service. In fact, I'm going to use an external service today, and we'll do that by, and I'm just going to copy and paste a command in here so I don't fat finger anything. You'll notice that we'll pass in a WireMock space record, the fully qualified, or I should say the URI base path of the service we're trying to record. Again, this can be an internal service, it can be an external service. So I'm going to record the external api.github.com like I do on all my videos and demonstrations. And then I'm going to specify where do I want these stubs to be generated. And we're going to specify that using the mock API ID. We can find the mock API ID once we're inside of our UI. You'll notice that is inside of our URL for the mock API we're currently in. So this is the target that we're going to record into. We'll just refresh this and make sure there are no stubs in there. And I can simply hit the return button here. Just takes a second, and we can see that it is now up and running. You'll see a couple of helpful hints here, proxying to HTTPS api.github.com, and that we need to send our consumer traffic to http://localhost port 80. I'll do that in this lower window down here. So let me issue a curl. So let's do a curl to http://localhost port 8000, and then we'll specify the path to the real API. So let's ask for the user's endpoint. We can see that in my consumer, it gets a valid response back, just like we would with the normal recorder. And in my CLI window, we're seeing the successful recording of a GET with a 200 response code to the user's endpoint. We can do this one or two more times. Let's ask for user 1. And let's go ahead and also ask for user 2 here. We can continue doing this on and on and on, run through our regression test set, our unit tests, whatever it needs to be to record that traffic. Once I'm done, I can hit enter to stop the recording, or ESC, escape if I wanted to cancel this recording. Maybe I got a whole bunch of errors, it wasn't configured properly. I can do that escape so it doesn't push a bunch of stuff into my mock API. But here, I like the recording. I'm going to hit the return button. We can see that we've successfully recorded 3 stub mappings, and they've been pushed to this particular mock API. So when I issue a refresh in the UI of WireMock Cloud, we can see the successful recording of those particular transactions that were recorded via the CLI. So again, not earth-shattering here when going against a publicly available API endpoint that's reachable from the internet, from anywhere, but this is leaps and bounds much more efficient and easier to use when you need to record those internal services that sit behind firewalls that aren't reachable from WireMock Cloud via the normal recording method. So hopefully you'll find this very easy to use. We'd love your feedback on this. And remember, this is just the first of many features that we have planned for the WireMock CLI. Stay tuned for some exciting developments in that space. All right, we're going to move on to the next piece here. I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for Ethan to go over our preview of the AI capabilities. So let's move on to creating stateful sets. Stateful sets, the use case here, right, is to easily and quickly create some stateful behavior inside of your mock API. The stateful engine is very powerful. It's got a ton of flexibility, but sometimes, you might find yourself scratching your head, well, where do I get started for my particular use case? And we hope to solve that with stateful sets. I'll point out that you need to be using a REST style of mock API. So if you use the unstructured, you won't find this stateful set button down here at the bottom. It only exists in the REST style of mock API. So when you create a new mock API, it asks you what type do you want to create. You'll want to choose that REST style. You'll have access to the stateful set. When we open this up, we can see that we were prompted for a few pieces of information. What we're going to provide here is an example post to the service that you want to build. So in my classic demonstration here, we're going to build a contact address book. I'm simply going to supply an example post body. So let me go ahead and use my fancy clipboard here to paste in an example post body. And then I will paste in the response for that post body as well. So we can see we're going to be passing in this style of post. And this is the expected response to come back. If we scroll down a little bit further, we'll see that we can have this stateful set generator create all, some, or just a few, right, of the different types of methods that we want on our stateful mock API. I'm going to leave them all selected right now, and we're just going to say create stateful set. And very rapidly, WireMock Cloud is able to generate a full scaffolding for this mock API that is fully stateful in managing these contacts. So if we come down to the create contacts and the post, we'll see that we're accepting, a post to the contacts endpoint. And if we look down into the stateful section, we won't go through this in details. We have other sessions and lots of videos and documentation on how to do that. You'll notice that it's defining a few variables for us, and then it's actually storing in the state that post. Now, a couple things to point out. In addition to all of this powerfulness and this head start of creating a stateful mock for you with all of these operations and the stateful configuration pre-programmed for you, there are a couple of new handlebar helpers that you'll see being used, and maybe a slightly different paradigm to how context is used when using the stateful set. In the past, we've demonstrated context maybe being an account number, or sometimes it's being an authorization header to separate different users from consuming the mock API, being able to retrieve different values based on your session ID or your authentication header value. In the stateful set generator, you'll see a slightly different approach, as I was mentioning, especially around the context. So spend some time in seeing how this is used, because some of these new handlebar helpers really are unlocked. The capabilities and the powerfulness of these new handlebar helpers are unlocked by this slightly different approach of how you can use context. So what you're seeing here is, we're defining a random ID, and then we're defining what the collection context name should be, and it's being context here. And then that context is being referenced via a handlebar helper. It's kind of a little bit looks circular, but it's not. The ID is being pulled in from that random ID generation. And then we're using some of the existing handlebar helpers like JSON merge. But you'll notice, there's this new argument to the JSON merge and remove nulls, which will allow the JSON merge to successfully remove elements, remove attributes from your collection when merging those JSONs. This is all written up in the documentation. I'll point that out to you in a little bit, but this is one of the new ones I wanted to point out to you. There's two more I want to point out to you as well for you to take a deeper dive on in your journey if you're interested. If we come into the list contacts, I believe this is where we'll see them. You'll see that we have an array join function going on here. And the one that I'm actually most excited about is this list state handlebar helper. One of the pieces of feedback that we've received from our customers, they love stateful mocking, of course, but they wanted some more capabilities around managing and observing what the state was across contexts. That's a tough word to say. So this list state one is a very powerful, handlebar helper where we can provide a context. So remember, this is that collection context. We were calling it contacts. And we can say, WireMock, I want you to list every potential value that is part of the context collection context right now, or in this case, the contacts. So this is a way for you to interrogate, hey, what are all of the values stored inside of this particular context, or key value pairs, I should say, stored inside of this particular context right now. And then coupling that with an array join allows us to print that out in the way that we want. So I invite you to play around with this stateful set to see how it's working, how this new use case for using context along with these handlebar helpers make it even more flexible than it was before inside the stateful engine. I know that's a lot to handle. We can, certainly have some discussions as part of customer success. Set some time with me. Reach out to us via the normal channels, via in product chat, via your Slack or Teams communication channels if you have those with us, or good old fashioned email if you want. All right, I'm going to hand it over here to Ethan with a few minutes left here to cover off on an AI preview for you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Like Dan was saying, and you just saw there with both the CLI, where now you can record things in cluster, you can record things behind a firewall. There's all kinds of new possibilities for how you even want to get started or plan getting simulated APIs into WireMock for your teams. And we're happy to meet with you to discuss that. And then the statefulness really unlocks this key capability of how do you truly replace production services in sandbox and test environments, because you really do need them to be stateful. And since it's easier than ever now, we highly recommend looking at that. But if you don't want to do it on your own, that's another one where we can pair with you at any point. And now what I'm going to do is actually show you a video of a capability we've got coming very soon. We've been hard at work building an MCP server for WireMock Cloud. Now, MCP is Model Context Protocol. It's a standard for communicating with AI models. If you're very up to speed on AI, this might be a little redundant for you, but it essentially gives tools a way to communicate with models more easily. In the video, you're going to see Cursor, which is the big AI coding IDE platform. What I want to call out is even though this video does it with Cursor, this will work with Copilot. This will work with any MCP-enabled IDE, which increasingly is all of them. Pretty much every major IDE is building AI and MCP support. So any IDE you're using, if it doesn't support MCP today, chances are it's in the works, and you'll see this will be usable by you pretty soon, or you can download Cursor or Copilot and try it out today. And what this video is going to show you is how natively inside the IDE, you can have the AI do tasks around API detection, abstraction, creation, configuration for you automatically, just based on the code base or your prompt requests. So I'll go ahead and roll this video. While it plays, I want to remind you, you can drop questions into the Q&A about anything you saw today or any other topic related to WireMock and WireMock Cloud. And after the video, we'll take a few more minutes and we'll address those questions.
In this demo, I'm going to show how Cursor and WireMock's MCP server, which is in prototype at the moment, can be used to take an app that has some API dependencies and to generate mocks for those dependencies in WireMock Cloud, and then swap the real APIs for the mocked APIs when the app is running in development mode. I've got the WireMock MCP server installed in my Cursor settings here, and I've also got some pre-baked rules that I've been developing that help the LLM generate sort of good quality WireMock mocks of the in the style that I prefer. So the app itself is a Next.js TypeScript app. I've generated it entirely with Cursor. I haven't written any code myself. It's essentially just does this at the moment. It shows me this kind of weather dashboard. And it makes 2 API calls in order to achieve this. So first of all, it calls IP API in order to find out my location from my IP address. And then it calls weather API with that information saying, get me the weather for whatever was returned from IP API. So we have 2 APIs to mock. Their base URLs are defined up here. As you can see at the moment, they're just kind of hard coded to the production API base URLs. Well, what we want is to, when in development, swap these out for our newly generated mocks. So I'm going to ask the LLM to do this for me. I've pre-written this prompt. It's basically just saying, create a mock excuse me, a mock API in WireMock Cloud for each of the APIs in this project. Configure the application to use when in development mode. I'm asking it explicitly not to create any local WireMock configuration, since it seems to like to do that sometimes unnecessarily. So let's kick this off. And what it should do first is scan the project and try and find all instances of external APIs that the project's calling out to. So it's discovered both of the APIs that we're using, which is good. And it's now starting to do some work with WireMock Cloud. So it's checked that we're logged into WireMock Cloud, and it's creating a mock API in WireMock Cloud for each of the APIs we found in the project. And now it's importing the stubs that it's generated into each of those that defines the behavior of the mock APIs. Okay, so it seems to have successfully done all the WireMock Cloud bits of the work. So now it's reconfiguring the application in order to integrate with these mocks. So you see we have these alternative base URLs here that it's configuring. While it's doing this piece of work, let's head over to WireMock Cloud and go to the mock API list. And here we are, I've got this weather API mock and IP API mock. And if we drop into one of these, we can see that this is a generated example of the data returned by the weather API. And then likewise, we've got a similar example of the IP API, the JSON that it returns. Okay, so it seems to have finished its work, and it's started the server on port 3001. So let's go and switch over to 3001, so we get the updated version of the dashboard. Okay, so this is still showing the same output, although the data in it's changed. But what this should have done is pulled it from the mock rather than the real thing, and we can go and check this if we go and have a look at the request log for here. So okay, we can see here that a request has been made to this mock API. It's come from a browser, so it looks like it was from our weather app. And so it looks like we're now fetching the mock data rather than the real data, which is good. And if we really want to prove the point, we can go and make an edit to the data that it's returning. So let's be a little bit more British about our description of the weather. So we'll put an alternative description for the weather condition in there. And when we go and hit refresh, we see it's changed to the description of the weather that I put in there. And that's about it. So that's shown how where we have some existing API dependencies in our project, we can fully automate the process using Cursor of substituting those for mocks very quickly and easily.
All right. So as you can see, that is pretty exciting. I think the world is full of code bases that with just a couple commands could use having all of their unit tests replaced with mock, and you'd see things like local environments, CI environments, pretty much instantly get incredibly reliable and more performant. And with that, I will tee up a few questions for y'all. We got a few minutes left. We might run 1 or 2 minutes over. The first question I got for you, Dan, is recording from the CLI is great. This is not strictly a CLI related question. What other ways do exist for getting the mock kind of automatically created in WireMock? I guess it means like import options, things like that.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So WireMock Cloud supports several different flavors of importing. We're getting started, giving you a head start on mock API creation. So we saw the recorder. We talked about the recorder that's built into the UI, built into the fully hosted SaaS. We now have the new WireMock CLI. A couple other methods there would be using the har log file approach. So har log files are a standard logging format of HTTP requests going over the wire. These can be generated from your browser developer tools. They can be generated from tools like TCPmon and Wireshark, just to name a few. It's a widely accepted format for recording that traffic. So you can capture that traffic in any other way and use that approach. Another very powerful way is using Postman collections. If you have Postman collections, you can go ahead and export that Postman collection in the standard Postman format and go ahead and import those into WireMock Cloud. I will stress that it's important that you have response examples inside your Postman collection. I've often been guilty of using Postman just to set up all the request side and hitting the test button without saving any example responses into my Postman collection. That wouldn't be very helpful to the Postman import. So if you're going to use that Postman import, make sure your collection includes some response examples as well. We also have the Open API import or Swagger definition file import for customers to use, as well as two WireMock specific formats. So there is the WireMock Cloud import, which is a WireMock Cloud JSON specification or configuration file that is generated using the export functionality built into WireMock Cloud. And the last one I'll mention is the WireMock open source project import. So if you're coming from the open source world and you're used to dealing with WireMock project folders, that's typically the WireMock folder. Inside of it is a mappings folder and maybe a few other folders. That mappings folder then contains one or more JSON files with the configuration set of all your stubs. You can import that entire WireMock open source project folder. So that outermost folder above the mappings folder will allow you to pull in all of those assets that you've been using in the open source world into WireMock Cloud and unlock all the additional great capabilities that you have only in WireMock Cloud.
Awesome. So as you just heard, there's tons of ways to get started, essentially. I think what we actually see that's interesting is a lot of people kind of don't know how many ways there are to quickly get started and do end up just kind of manually trying to piece it together themselves. We actually just changed the UI of making a new API to try to bring forward more how easily you can get started quickly through any one of these kind of automated efforts. Okay, so another question we had, I think this one might be targeted a little bit at me. What else can you do with the CLI other than record? So the CLI is kind of a platform of the product experience going forward. I think it's fair to say we want to bring almost anything you can do remotely into the CLI experience, including mock playback, so that maybe you can run those mocks locally in a hybrid environment. All of that is forthcoming. You'll see it over the coming months. The first release, which is out now, is focused on finally improving this recording experience to take away some of those recording barriers that Dan mentioned earlier. We have another question on the CLI. Is it recording just for a local machine? Can it be used as a proxy or in Kubernetes? I'll let you take that one, Dan.
Can it be used as a standalone as a proxy? So, or in Kubernetes, yeah, you could. It's really meant to be a short running process, right? As nothing will be pushed to WireMock Cloud or usable until you stop that recording. So running it in running it in a long running stance or posture, there's really not much of a use case for that for that just yet. We do have a lot of future plans, as Ethan's been mentioning. It really is, meant for short-lived. Let's record the interactions, much like you would use the recorder in the UI or via the API today to record a run through your unit tests, to run a run through your regression suite, and then stop the recorder to generate the mock API. That's the use case today. Where you run it, on a local machine, on a centralized server, that's really up to you. The quickest, easiest, hopefully, as you saw in the demonstration, is just to get it installed via npm and start it up. If you are running it in a shared capacity, right, that, as you notice, you do need to log into WireMock Cloud so it knows who owns the mock API, if you have write permissions to the mock API. So you will need a named user, right, to make use of that CLI. If you are running it as a shared resource in a centralized server, that could be a challenge that you'd have to clear there.
Yep. All right, it looks like we are a few minutes over, so thank you for sticking around. One thing I do want to stress with the CLI, with the stateful wizard, with the AI capabilities coming soon, these are all new capabilities. We're not big fans of releasing new as in untested. So when we release new things, they tend to be pretty solid at what they do. But these are new experiences, right? These are things we didn't do a few months ago. So we actually would love your feedback. So you're welcome to go to the documentation, check out the CLI, check out the stateful set wizard that Dan mentioned. Anything you think is cool, anything you want to see it do next, anything you think it could be improved on, we are all ears. We love to work super closely with our users as design partners. There's a little chat button in the bottom right of the app you can use anytime. You can email me at ethan@wiremock.io or dan@wiremock.io. Any of your preferred ways of getting in touch, we would love to hear from you. And with that, I will let you go. Thanks for joining us in your morning, evening, whatever time zone you're in. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next month, where we will be talking about our new GraphQL support. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week.